China is calling its aggressive show of naval force off the coast of Taiwan a stern warning against any move by the Southeast Asian island to seek independence.
As tensions heat up between the United States and China, especially around Taiwan, the U.S. is doing something that feels straight out of history books. It's reviving old World War II bases across the Pacific. And one of the most important ones, Subic Bay, right here in the Philippines. Once the crown jewel of America's Navy in Asia,
are converging on Subic Bay, the American Navy base in the Philippines.
Subic is now being rebuilt, upgraded, rearmed, and reimagined for a whole new kind of power struggle in the Indo-Pacific. And the story behind why this is happening might just tell us what the next big conflict could look like. So let's talk about this. How Subic Bay is being modernized, and who's investing in it. The new military infrastructure's rising there. The bigger strategy behind all these upgrades, and what all this could mean if things ever turn hot with China. It's part history, part strategy, and a whole lot of geopolitics. Alright, let's unpack it. You've probably seen the headlines. The US and China have been in a tense stare-down for years now. China wants Taiwan back. It's building military bases on artificial islands in the South China Sea. And it's been expanding its navy faster than anyone else on the planet. That's where the US comes in. See, the US and its allies draw an invisible line called the First Island Chain, a string of islands from Japan to the Philippines that forms a natural barrier around China's coast. Whoever controls that chain can basically decide what ships or aircraft can move in or out of China's backyard. But here's the problem, China knows that too. So they came up with what's called an A2AD strategy. That stands for Anti-Access/Area Denial. Fancy term, huh? But think of it this way. China's goal is to make it super dangerous for US forces to get close. Missiles that can hit ships hundreds of miles away. Radar networks that can spot aircraft early. And long-range strike systems that can keep the US at arm's length. And because of that, the US can't just park a bunch of carriers in one spot anymore. If they did, they'd be sitting ducks. So Washington's response? A strategy called ACE, Agile Combat Employment. Instead of keeping all their planes and troops in one big base, they spread them out across lots of smaller bases all over the Pacific. Think of it like spreading your pieces evenly across your party instead of putting all your power in one card. That's why old places like Subic are making a comeback, because the US wants more launch pads, not just one big fortress. And that brings us to the Philippines. Subic Bay isn't just some random port on the map. This place has history. Back in World War II, it was a major US Navy hub.
20 ships, including aircraft carriers, minesweepers and ocean-going tugs,
huge dry docks, aircraft repair hangars, even submarines pulling in and out of its deep waters. When the Americans left in the 1990s, it became a free port zone, a commercial area with factories, shipyards, and businesses. But here's the thing, that old military DNA never really went away. The harbor is still deep enough for aircraft carriers, and the roads and airfields still make it ideal for logistics and operations. So when the US started looking around for forward bases again, Subic's name shot straight back to the top of the list. Imagine what a new and modernized Subic can provide. A new chapter is being written. Today, Subic is buzzing again. Not with tourists, but with investments and construction. American private equity firm Cerberus Capital poured around $250 million to buy and upgrade the old Hanjin shipyard, now called the Agila Subic Shipyard. It's massive, one of the biggest dry docks in the world, and it's being modernized to handle large naval ships, not just commercial vessels. Companies like HD Hyundai and Subcom are setting up operations there too. Meanwhile, the Philippine Navy is slowly moving some of its ships to Subic, while the Air Force plans to turn the old airport into a forward base for patrol and surveillance aircraft. There's even talk of restoring the two nearby islands, Grande and Chiquita, as official military reservations. Basically, new mini-bases to protect the bay and support US and Philippine operations. And if that's not enough, there are plans for storage warehouses, maintenance facilities, and possibly even ammunition depots in partnership with the US. So, yeah, Subic is coming back. Bigger, smarter, and more flexible. But why now? What's the real urgency behind all this money and movement? Here's where things get really interesting. See, this whole Subic revival isn't just about old memories or rebuilding a base for nostalgia's sake. It's about positioning, like moving your pieces on a chessboard before the real game even starts. If China ever makes a move on Taiwan, or tries to lock down the South China Sea, the US needs to be close enough to respond fast, really fast. But not too close that its bases get wiped out in the first strike. That's where Subic comes in. Subic sits in a kind of Goldilocks zone. Not too far, not too near, but just right. It's far enough from China's coastal missile range to be relatively safe, yet close enough for jets, ships, and supply planes to reach the front lines in hours, not days. It's like being just outside the blast zone, safe enough to breathe, but near enough to jump into the fight if things go bad. And that's what the Americans are aiming for. Flexibility. Instead of relying on one big vulnerable fortress, like Guam, the US now wants a network of smaller, smarter bases across the Pacific. This approach is called Agile Combat Employment, or ACE for short. Think of it like switching from one giant power bank to a bunch of smaller ones spread around. Even if you lose one, the others keep the system running. ACE is all about keeping US forces mobile, unpredictable, and hard to hit. That's why Subic Bay, with its deep harbor, its airfields, its shipyards, suddenly fits the plan perfectly. It's like finding an old tool in the garage and realizing it's exactly what you need for the job ahead. But it's not just about ships and planes. Subic also gives the US and the Philippines a logistics lifeline, a place to store fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and supplies that can keep an entire task force running during a crisis. Because in any real conflict, it's not always the side with the biggest guns that wins. It's the one that can keep its forces fed, fueled, and fixed. In a shooting war, every hour counts. If a ship gets damaged or a plane needs refueling, Subic could be the difference between getting back in the fight or sitting it out. That's why the US is quietly rebuilding this whole arc of bases from Japan to Palau, and Subic is right at the heart of that ring. It's not just a port. It's a launch pad, a lifeline, and maybe one day the hinge point of the entire Pacific strategy. But of course, not everyone's thrilled about this comeback. Because where strategy moves in, politics and danger always follow. Inside the Philippines, not everyone agrees with this open arms policy toward the US military. Some groups warn that allowing American facilities back could paint a target on Subic if war ever breaks out. China, predictably, isn't happy either, calling these moves provocative and warning the Philippines not to invite trouble. But here's the hard truth. The Philippines sits in one of the most strategic spots on Earth. It can't just stay neutral while the world's two biggest powers flex around it. President Marcos Jr. has been clear. The Philippines wants to strengthen its alliances and modernize its defense. And Subic is right at the heart of that plan. Still, if war does come, Subic could quickly shift from being a port of progress to a frontline base. And everyone, both in Washington and Manila, knows it. Which raises the question, what's the endgame here? At the end of the day, Subic Bay isn't just steel and seawalls. It's a symbol of how history loops back on itself. A base that once helped win World War II might now become critical in preventing a new one. It's a chessboard move, one piece in a much bigger game between the US and China. And whether Subic becomes a shield or a target will depend on what happens next across the Pacific. But one thing's for sure. The world's watching Subic again. And for the Philippines, it's not just about letting the Americans back in. It's about making sure that this time the country stands ready, not as a bystander, but as a key player in shaping the balance of power in Asia.